I hope you're enjoying your practice, and thank you for taking a couple minutes to spend with me today. I hope that some of the ideas I share with you today you can go back and apply as soon as you get done watching this video, because that's the best way to work. When I was in grad school, I didn't have any time because I was working professionally and I was going to grad school, and so I had a lot of classwork to do and so forth, and I was playing in ensembles at the school. So the only time I had to practice was right after my lesson. That's for the whole week. So I would practice for skill like we're doing today, but I had to learn all the music and kind of cram in those couple of hours after my lesson. And I found that was the best way to work. So if you watch one of these videos and you go like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, hopefully that's what'll happen. And then you go have a chance to try it and see if you can understand it by your own direct experience, physically and with your own ears. That's going to be the most benefit to you. So I encourage you, don't spend all your time watching the videos. Spend most of your time trying to understand what I'm talking about, if possible, and then applying it in your own practice. So we're going to move on today in the Schlossberg, and number 12 did some simple lip slur patterns going up. Number 13 does the same simple patterns going down, covering an octave. And now we're going to keep covering an octave with number 14. And this one has a little crescendo, decrescendo. Remember, you can change the dynamics, you can change any of the markings, you can change the style, you can change anything you want. But when you're playing drills, it's a good idea to try and get in a groove. So doing something relatively the same and seeing how accurately you can hit that target is a good way to practice. So I'll play a little bit of number 14 for you. Okay, I know that's not very interesting to listen to, or maybe it is, but whatever the case, when you're playing, you have to be listening. Now that sounds like a dumb observation, but what I found is that I can always listen better, and most of my students don't listen nearly well enough. Listen critically, listen intensely. Be so absorbed in what you're experiencing with the sound that it's giving you a tremendous amount of information. Now, there are a lot of things going on there. I wasn't particularly comfortable, but it is what it is. I was thinking too much. My mind was wandering. It's that time of the day. I just got a phone call about GR mouthpieces right before I started this video, so that was an interesting distraction. And we're all dealing with these kinds of distractions, internal and external, all the time. So being able to concentrate in this way is actually very therapeutic. But it has to be interesting to you. So let's focus on a couple of things. Mechanics. Let's say you're having trouble. You might be having this kind of trouble. You hear that snapping sound. That's very common, at least to some degree. I exaggerated it pretty severely so you could hear it. But what's happening is I'm blowing harder, and I blow hard, and at some point, if my embouchure doesn't collapse, the sound is going to snap up to the next overtone, and you can hear that pop. And that's an interesting musical effect, but actually what you're doing is you're trying to push too much air past your embouchure. When you do, you put stress on the muscles, and it gets harder to hold that opening in your lips in the right position, and eventually it pops over, and then you're in the new note, and it feels pretty comfortable. But you're not making a smooth transition between notes. And that's one of the main things that these exercises give you a great opportunity to practice. So we talked about sing, buzz, play earlier. And that's a great way to go away from what we might call the breaks or the slots, the overtones in the horn, and go to something that doesn't have breaks, like your voice or like the mouthpiece. It's just a smooth, continuous sound. And that's great therapy for this. So I strongly recommend that sing, buzz, play procedure when you're feeling tight. Now, I felt a fair amount of tension when I was doing that. It was manageable. And this brings up a really important point. When you feel awkwardness, when you feel tension, work, trying too hard, struggle, even if it's at a very, very low level, your body is sending you signals that something is not quite right. You know that. And so there are two ways of dealing with it. One way is ignore it and concentrate on the music. And that's one of the best things that you can do. It's not that you're not aware. You feel that your body is, not totally comfortable. You're not playing the best that you can. It's a little bit off. But if you allow yourself to be distracted by all those signals that your body is telling you, then you start to micromanage everything and try and control what you're doing physically, and that's not productive. That's not productive. You have to have a unified musical thought and a simple musical target that you're trying to hit, and then just listen for whether you're doing it or not. So, in other words, stay loose, stay comfortable, and when you feel that physical tension, just ignore it and let go. Now, that's really easy to say, and most people, in my experience, fight. I certainly do a lot of it myself, so I understand about that. So, fighting against the breaks in the horn. So I'm overblowing, and as a result, my lips are really stiff. And when they're stiff, they don't vibrate very well. So how am I gonna get better at that? Well, I have to go back to starting with the air. Just a simple sigh. Then when there's resistance, now I have the resistance of my vocal cords, as I talked about with the sing, buzz, play procedure that we were doing. Now I can feel a little bit of resistance. Going to the mouthpiece. Now I have a little more resistance than the vocal cords, but my air is exactly the same. So the first thing I do, air is the number one priority. So if I end up going, I'm severely overblowing. In other words, I'm trying to push too much volume of air through this small opening in my lips. And when I do that, the pressure starts to rise and the air starts to back up. And now I'm fighting myself, and I'm fighting the instrument. A colleague of mine likes to say, don't fight the trumpet. If you do, you will lose. And that's very true. So the key to success is figuring out how to agree with the trumpet and don't fight against it. That's kind of what we're doing on these little exercises. Okay, so there are many other things that people struggle with, but I mentioned that overblowing one. That's a very common one. Here's another common one. If we were working together, for example, I would hear what you're doing, I'd see what you're doing, and I'd have an idea of where to go. But since we're not together live, I can't do that. So I simply have to address the most common issues that I see in the students that I've worked with over the years. So here's another very, very common one. And some people are extraordinarily good at this. So it's not a bad thing. It's just interesting. Or as I've said before, it just is. And what am I talking about? I'm going to play it a little differently. I'm doing all those note changes by squeezing and tightening and loosening with my lip. And I've had a couple of students, two that I remember very distinctly because they were so good at this. They could do all their lip changes, all their changes of pitch on the trumpet just by tightening and loosening the aperture. So they had good conscious control over this small area of the lip. Here's the problem. That takes a lot of energy. And when you squeeze at the aperture, you're reducing the freedom of resonance that I talked about in the last video. So if I go, now I totally squeeze the aperture off. But most people are just kind of squeezing it a little too much all the time. Now, other people have the other problem. See, I don't know who you are, I don't know your situation, so other people, the aperture isn't well defined enough. It's too loose, it's too open, it's too floppy, right? So we're trying to find a balance. And one way that you can experience this is to try and whistle. If you already know how to whistle, you have something that's, while it's not like trumpet playing, at least your lips you see, I'm not changing the opening in my lip. And check it out with a mirror. Now, you might be going, if you're doing that kind of manipulation, trying to change it with your lip, that means you're a trumpet player. Because that's what most trumpet players are trying to do. And it's very, people that have problems with endurance, problems with range, which many players do, this is one of the things that's causing the problem. So overblowing is one of the big issues that causes problems with endurance, for example, and quality of sound. And this pinching with the aperture causes problems. So what's the answer? Those two things, the flow of the air and the posture of the lip, have to be kept in balance all the time. So if you think about it like whistling, now I mentioned this in another video. I'm creating a sibilance, a kind of a whistling sound, but I'm not actually whistling. Now, when I play the trumpet, I'm not doing that. I'm doing something like it. And I want you to keep this in mind. So if you think, oh, that's what I'm supposed to do, you go to the trumpet, and you'll be too tight. So what I'm doing is something like that, only with less tension. So my tongue is tight like this, but I can have that same position where the air just kind of zips over the top of the tongue. I can have that same position without having any excess muscular tension in the tongue. Why is this important? Let me show you. My country, 'tis of the sweet land of liberty. My problem is that my tongue is tight. No, my country, see, I'm not doing anything with my lips. My country, all I got to do is let go of the tongue. I'm not actually doing, it sounds like my throat is tight. Well, guess what? When we get deeper into the individual mechanics, like the tongue is the most complex and the most important, the most critical of all of them for trumpet playing. And I think Claude Gordon said that, and Rafael Mendez said that, and many other people too. And in the same way that when we sing, if we have our tongue tight, my country, all I did was let go. So now I'm at a neutral position. When you're playing these exercises well, your tongue, your jaw need to be in a relaxed singing position. Now I understand, everybody has different teeth, different lips, different jaw, different tongue, different oral cavity. We all have different sizes and shapes, different textures, different capabilities. All you're trying to do is figure out how to use what you've got as well as you can. Don't use that as an excuse. I have bad teeth. They're not lined up. I have to do some weird things in order to get into a good position. If my teeth were even and straight, and I've observed this in my students, I have some students that just have like beautiful teeth. And while I know how to use my embouchure much more expertly than they do, their embouchure works better than mine does. So think about that. You see, you know, when you look at advanced level players, these are people who've figured out their own stuff. And that's what I want to encourage you to do through all this stuff. So through all these exercises and drills. Keep it interesting. So now I'm going to try and play a little bit more correctly. So one of the best things you can do is keep the when you sing like that and you change those notes, you won't notice that you're going you're not pushing and pulling with the air. So steady airstream is absolutely critical. Are things happening with the air? Yes, but that's your tongue that's doing that. And you may have heard this before, and you have to figure it out. Some people figure it out very early. Mr. Vizzuti, for one, figured it out very early. Mr. Faddis figured it out very early. You know, you can hear it in their playing. Mr. Nakaryakov figured this out very, very early, and Mr. Hardenberger. And you can figure it out. It takes a heightened awareness of what's going on inside the mouth, and that starts, and here's the point, that starts with staying neutral. So if I go, so now my tongue is tight, forget about it. You have to come back to that same neutral place over and over and over again. And you can do that by singing, and then you want to gradually progress into airstream, whistling, buzzing, maybe with a burp, or some of my colleagues just kind of do this. You just kind of wrap the fingers around, create a little resistance. Okay, one third problem, and this is another very common one, and I'm going to show you, I'm going to do it for you, and you'll recognize it right away, I think. I'm mechanically, and that works. Try it. That's a shake. All you're doing is changing the pressure of the mouthpiece. Now, if you can't do a shake, there are a lot of reasons. I'm not going to talk about that now because that's a whole skill that some people are good at, some people aren't good at it, and there are reasons for that. You can figure it out. You can do it. But that's a very interesting thing, that all you do is push the mouthpiece onto your face and the pitch goes up. Quick story from my early teaching days. My first job after graduate school was teaching at the University of Missouri in Kansas City. And I had some wonderful students there who I remember fondly, even after 50 years, almost. And one of them started his student teaching in the public schools. And he was horrified to see the band director that he was working with get the young players to play higher on the trumpet or the cornet by pushing the horn into their face. I'm pretty horrified by that too, actually. But why? Because it works. So you go, as long as you keep blowing and you force your lips to vibrate, you'll go higher. Now, that's because the metal of the mouthpiece is actually causing a squeezing effect by compressing your lip, and that causes the pitch to go up. So pressure is important, pressure is critical, but just like the tongue, it has to be supple. It can't be rigid and forced like this. So if you notice yourself using more pressure, that may be completely appropriate. But, well, I'll just show you. And I'll show you this at other times. I hold the horn by putting my thumb underneath the bell and underneath the lead pipe. I'm not hooking onto the brace. I'm not helping myself by doing that. I'm simply the thumb underneath the lead pipe and the thumb underneath the bell. And then I'm letting the weight of the horn rest. Now, obviously, I use slightly more pressure for the high C, but it's a good thing to practice. Why? Because the reason why I did that is so you can see it's not essential, it's not required that you use more pressure to play higher. You'll use some, and you need to let that happen. Everybody is different. Some people play with generally more pressure all the time on the embouchure. As long as your embouchure setup is designed and conditioned to take that pressure, you won't have a problem with it. You don't need to worry about it at all. But for most people, it's a limiting factor. Because if the lip gets stiffer and tighter as we use more pressure, what happens as we go up in the range? Well, again, I'm going to play the last part of this exercise again so you get an idea. That time I'm squeezing the lip. I'm going to do it slowly so you can hear the difference in the sound. So you hear the lower note is louder and the upper note is softer and more dull, I would say. It's not as brilliant in sound. We talked about sound quality a lot in the last video, and that can be a way for you to work to solve these problems. Solve the problems with the pressure, solve the problems with the proper support and flow of the air, and solve the problems with using the embouchure to squeeze the notes. So when everything is in balance, now if I overcompensate by pressing a little bit with the mouthpiece, more than I need to, then I throw myself off balance. If I'm squeezing more with the lip, I throw myself off balance. If I'm choking the air in the throat or tightening in the body, I don't have consistency in the flow of the air. I throw myself off balance. So these are balancing exercises. That's all we're trying to do. Now, the next exercise, he's covering, again, just an octave and moving up and down through the 7 positions on the trumpet. This is 15. So now, to do that really fast and in tune, and with an equal sound on all the notes, is actually quite difficult. So don't expect yourself necessarily to be able to do that. And I would start by singing it. See, broken record here. Buzzing it. As soon as I can have consistent flow, energy, spin, directionality to the airstream, support, follow through to the airstream, and it's continuous and smooth, just like it was on the buzz, then I can do this exercise. I can figure out how to do it. So I hope this is going to give you some tools from your own experimentation that can help you to improve your playing. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm doing these videos. So I sincerely hope that this is helpful to you. Next time we're going to talk about some other issues and move on to number 16 and 17 in the Schlossberg, and I hope that you find that helpful as well. I'll see you later on. Have a great day and enjoy your practice. Bye-bye.